Hello and good morning. Richard Miller here. You're at Open Mic on Never Not Here. And we're talking to more and more people, so Open Mic means you're invited too. So if you get the yen and you want to come and talk about what you've learned about life, what's happening with you, and just go public, you're more than welcome. So this morning we're with Paul A. Toth. And,
Morning.
Good morning, Paul.
Morning to you.
I was going to say author and musician, right?
Quasi-musician.
Okay, we'll go for that.
Let's be specific.
And you're on the East Coast, right?
No, actually, I'm in Florida.
Oh, gotcha. I was thinking, since you're an author, to say a lot of times we talk about what is a story, because we talk to filmmakers, we talk to authors, and we want to know, well, what kind of story can you tell and what kind of story is interesting? And
Yes.
I don't know, I believe that a story, in a way, in order to be popular in any sense of the term, has to have an emotional content, and it has to be kind of like an emotional ride, or seems like the ones that sell the most are roller coaster rides.
That's true. Yeah, I would agree. They have a kind of they're entertainment, obviously, and I'd say the same is basically true about popular films. Most of them, obviously. So, in general, I think that's a major component of the most popular.
Yeah,
Any
I'm
kind
talking
of
about
creative
film
work.
too. I'm definitely talking about film too. I'm just
Yes.
talking about what kind of a story can, in the Western world, maybe, because we don't know so much about the primitive stories or the myth, the original myths, or, we can also study in the West, Joseph Campbell, and what, mythology is kind of the base of our belief structure, and it's kind of like all our stories are built on that.
Yes, I would agree. Buried in everything is some element of those myths
Right,
that
and
we,
whether
you
they're
know,
changing or not changing, I mean, some of the original myths seem to be there. There's a creation story, and I don't know, there might even be an Adam and Eve in every religion somewhere, the
probably,
original couple, right? I mean,
yeah, in some form or another.
somebody was even saying scientifically that there was some kind of basal gene that they say would be one woman in Africa would be
Ah,
our great grandmother,
I never thought of it that way. Yeah,
Yeah, and they
that's
find that in the DNA or something like that, and they say, well,
yeah,
that's that same chain is there in everybody. Really, it's universal, so that must mean, whether that's true or not. It's just another part of a myth, right? I mean, and then science is saying, that's the true part of the myth.
I wonder if they ever actually identified her, if that would become sort of our new, God in a sense. If that might form kind of if you want to call it scientific religion, where we would know our one true mother, so to speak.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether that
This,
would be the God, but it sure would be like the brother and sisterhood.
yes, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking more, scientifically, but just as playing off the idea of the Adam and Eve thing. But
So I always wonder if some new story can happen, something different. And I've got a lot of takes on the value of emotion and the value of especially frightened emotion or survival emotions, and whether I mean they're in all the stories, I guess, because that's otherwise we wouldn't really be on a true roller coaster.
yeah, I mean, think about Stephen King. Probably, I'm sure a lot of his popularity is that that's primarily what his fiction is drawn from, and the emotion. That's one of the key emotions. Fear. I've heard him discuss it actually. One of my favorite comments I've heard him make is all of his novels, the horror novels, are based on his own fears And he even, I thought it was somewhat courageous to admit that when he came up with the idea for writing The Shining, uh, the fear in that one for him was his own fear that what if he uh, went off, went off the deep end and killed his own family. That was a fear of his at the time, and that was the basis of the novel. So he plays upon his actual personal fears to in the way you mentioned, and I would say that has a great deal to do with why he has been so popular.
Yeah, it is a fascination, Somehow I've got a take on it. I guess and we all make judgments, right? And so I'm no
Mm-hmm.
different, right? and,
Yeah, can't escape it.
yeah, I'm not really trying to say I'm beyond all that, and it's, well, okay, I try to go easy on it because I think it's part of the mechanism. We're all endowed with a judgment mechanism. And
Yeah,
to say that we shouldn't, it shouldn't really kick off, it's a bad boy. I don't really go for that too much, but I think that's a judgment right there. That's another one, a judgment about our judgments. So then it's just
it's
the same thing. It's just more of the same thing. And if you want to somehow transcend or go beyond judgment, you don't do it with another judgment.
yeah, I'd say you have to accept it, and probably the best we can all do is mitigate it, or also try to identify ways in which we're being inappropriately judgmental, or often judging in others what we're actually really judging in ourselves. And we don't see it in ourselves. We see it when someone else does it, so we judge them.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's a
called
little, that's,
projecting, right? We
yes,
project
you
all,
got
because how would we even know it was in the other if we didn't have a feel for it ourselves?
it.
It's
Exactly.
all. I would say it's totally 100% projected. But I mean, not
Uh,
many people are willing to be that introspective. Most of them
well,
are just saying, "Well, no, 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 that guy's a jerk." I mean, come on, get real.
yeah,
Look at it for yourself.
and I still do it, but I've learned that I can become much less judgmental of myself by starting with becoming less judgmental of others. And I suppose that's basically a Christian concept. I'm not personally Christian, but of course we're all influenced by it. And my view is, I anything that seems useful to me, wherever it comes from, is fine with me. So. Uh,
So anyhow, getting back to stories, okay, here's Stephen King, and he's sharing his fears. In other words,
yeah,
because they're his own fears, and he's saying, okay, let's have a story about it, and you guys can have it too. And okay, then where am I going with judgment? My judgment is that if I had any chance, I would extinguish my fears in other people. I wouldn't give them to them. And is there any way to do that with a story? And I believe there would be. I mean, why wouldn't there be? But somehow we could call it entertaining, but somehow it's, what's a good word? It's kind of like a trance, You can go into a trance of fascination. It's fascinating to go deeper and deeper into your fear and someone else's fear. Now, I don't know what's the real basis of that fascination, but I would say that it's a destructive tendency of our modern day world.
on a positive, I agree with that. But on the positive end, I would say, and this is just my view, that it partially goes back to the Greek tragedies, which in part, have the catharsis aspect, where it's meant to hopefully, to some degree, provide an outlet, in a sense, for those aspects of our personality, though we experience as part of an entertaining drama, but an intense one. Same thing with Stephen King, very intense form of entertainment, you know.
So I like when you say catharsis, but catharsis, I guess it doesn't work because it just keeps coming back, and we keep getting what I call fascinated with, fascinated with the catharsis. Let's do it again. That was so much fun. We'll go on that ride again. Let's do it again. But really, and the only way to do it again is harder, right? Because why do it the same? It's blasé. And so then if there's some kind of terror, some kind of violence, or some kind of way to extract blood out of people, let's do it even and there is an element like that, or just look at the movies and the special effects and how they have to get really more fantastic and more destructive, or otherwise it's total boring. And who wants to see that one Gone with the Wind again, right?
Exactly. And I would say when we talk about film, a problem with that is, of course, how much further can we go?
We can go
Right.
all the way, baby. I don't think there's any limit.
But at some point, I think it turns into a blank screen of, where there's so much action that it turns into white noise,
Well, for
I,
me, it's already a blank screen, because mine is turned off. There's no
mine
way I
too.
would look at that crap.
I have my TVs are merely for film. I won't watch TV anymore, mainly because I found it to be uh, after for financial reasons we decided we would cut our cable bill. But after that, I discovered a benefit, which is that without knowing it, it was agitating me. Whether not just the content, but the lights and constant noise, etc. And now, say I go to a doctor's office, I don't know if you've noticed, often they'll have a TV there. And I always think, first of all, do we can we not even go to a doctor's office without having to watch TV? And then secondly, for me personally, I now find that very agitating, the sound, and I'd rather just sit there and read a magazine or just wait. But so it's interesting the acceleration, as you say, become necessary to
Yeah, I haven't
maintain the
really shared
effect.
that. I have not really shared that. I think my wife knows, and she thinks I'm a kook. But she knows I get agitated by movies or by anything. I just jump through the window when one goes on, or like in the airports and stuff. I kind of stay out of the rays and all that stuff, and I'm not really making all that stuff up to be real. But I mean,
No,
yeah, the
I feel the
reason.
same way.
Yeah, so I'm just totally relating to you. Totally relate to it, and the reason it's kind of different than reality, because the reason the agitation factor for me is that this thing is arbitrary and I haven't invited it in. Now, on
Yes,
the other hand, if there's riots in Egypt, or if there's a death in Tiananmen Square, or if there's earthquakes, and somehow that is not arbitrary. That is real, and somehow that evokes huge compassion in me, and I'm okay with it. I'm just totally okay with it. I do not get agitated. But somehow
right.
the part that's just like, take this jab, take this entertainment, ride my roller coaster, I have no use for any of those kind of stories, and I'm not really very good with books or anything.
I would call it, distraction for the sake of distraction is that's what I find agitating. So if it's really a news event like the kind you just described, that's one thing. But if it's the kind of news we more often get now, celebrity news, that kind of thing, without so much judging the content going back to that, uh, it's not a real news event. It's just a distraction, and I I always feel I know it's impossible, but I would prefer to be asked before having that imposed on me, and especially in public settings where I don't have the remote control.
Yeah, right. No, I,
I
I
can't turn it
totally,
off.
totally relate to you, like if you ever thought you were somehow deficient or special, man, I am totally with you. Like
I
you,
think
you and I are brothers on that one.
there's a lot of us, I believe.
Yeah. So like celebrities and stuff like that. Okay, it seems in one sense it's totally inane. It's harmless. It's benign. There's no cancer there. But just like you said, distraction. Okay, distraction is actually quite damaging because it takes our attention away from what could be important. And
Precisely.
all the scandals of elections and sex scandals and all those kind of things are so idiotic, and they really just take our attention away from running the country, or fixing what's broke, or relooking at our basic systems, like our basic financial systems, the Fed and the stock market and all that stuff that's proving in hard times, proving to be so fragile, and it crashes for so many people. And who knows? The whole world's going to go down probably by. I was saying the other day. I think I remember it brought to mind the old mythology where the whole world was thought to be on the back of a turtle, and this huge giant tortoise, and it's the it's the free world capital mechanism. And when that turtle turns out to be a hare and jumps to the left and to the right, and the whole world falls off. I mean, it's strange. There's all these people, they all want to work. There's all these goods and services. I mean, all the factories are still there, and they're getting, boarded up. And
I'm
it's all there, but it's kind of like capital is failing. The whole capital market is arbitrary and favoritism and
that that's why I would argue that there these distractions, and especially news stories, the any massacre, that type of spectacular, disturbing event is covered 24 hours on those news channels. I believe that's not a merely for. I believe that is there for not just to accumulate the audience, but is intended to distract us from the very issues you say. I would argue that you mentioned that is part of their purpose. For instance, remember recently the little story that went viral about the birds dropping out of the sky? If you heard about that one?
no, I missed that one, but go for it.
Okay.
Tell me.
Well, there was apparently it, I don't know where it started, but there was a quote news story about birds dropping dead out of the sky, and it was portrayed as though it were this anomaly. Well, later scientists explained, no, this always occurs, and no one's ever reported it before. Scientists knew about it, those who study that area. It was only news to the rest of the public because they saw it as a one-time event and didn't realize it happens every year.
No, they actually probably personalized it and said, "Oh, man is doing that. Our pollution is killing the birds, and they can't even fly anymore. They just die in midair, and wham, they crash."
But there is an aspect to it where you can see the part where it's an example that it's not even actually a story, in the sense that it's not something that just happened once as it was portrayed. It just happens all the time and got picked up this year as though it were this year's news, when it could have been any year's news. And I think that gets everybody talking about birds falling out of the sky, when we have all the major problems you discussed, that we might want to spend more time talking about that than birds falling out of the sky, especially when it was proven it wasn't a global warming issue or something like that.
Right. But I mean, okay, let's say here we are on the internet, and a lot of people are watching us. And
yes.
So then we can talk about something that's important to us. And so
right.
I suppose that's the only way it's going to really happen. Little by little, two people get together and talk about what is important. And
yes.
And don't distract, and don't and we can distract and play too. We can do our thing, but we kind of want to be contributors also to what works for society. And I mean, I guess if you let your mental projection, your story, your idea of what causes effects and how the effects are going, I guess you could project a pretty gruesome life for our grandchildren, right? I mean, like, things seem to be really going to the pits, as far as protecting the environment, having any environment left, figuring out how one man can get along with another man, figuring out how people could get fed and people could get healed, and somehow, if we were trying on purpose to build some kind of a topsy-turvy deck of cards and get it as high as possibly we could and see it crash with the biggest bang, I suppose we couldn't do a better job than we're doing. I don't know.
I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah.
I my feeling is that it could. I would put it this way: capital capitalism may have won globally, but it essentially won its own destruction eventually, along with that of the world. So it's not. It may be a victory in terms of economic system or political structure, but in the long run, what what will be won in the long run of history, not whatever is earned now by those who are quote winning. In the long run, I think we'll all lose as a result of that. Uh,
To me, it seems like the only solution is to take the ism out of everything, and say, okay, there's capitalism, there's socialism, and there's some other kind of isms and fundamentalism, and there's communism or whatever kind of isms there are really, really, really narrow thinking that these are alternatives, but they're not really. I mean, free market is something where price adjusts with supply and demand. But if you look at it a little deeply, it depends on something called scarcity. Because if
mm-hmm.
there's too much of anything, of course, it's not worth making it anymore. And then a lot of things are not ever considered by companies or like with the capitalist model because they can't be patented. And
Yes.
so then one great example is herbal medicines, which have worked for thousands and thousands of years, which are part of our body anyhow, nature, the dirt, the topsoil, the plant, the way plants are. And that really work. I mean, I think people have proven that the natural medicine works. And instead, our main billion-dollar advertising focus is to debunk it as grandma tales. And you got to take these new pills, and the chemical model of medicine is the only way to go, and it's not sustainable. It's not even proven,
No.
and
No.
so then
But
that
what?
capitalism can't touch that stuff, or free market can't touch it either because it's totally free. Like okay, like someone was bringing healthcare to India, or they're doing it right now, as a matter of fact, too. And there's thousands, 20, tens and tens of thousands of little villages still there where their people are in their own little agriculture, and they're bringing herb gardens to each one of these villages, and then they're actually teaching people how to use the herbs, and then they're actually giving cuttings of every herb so that every household actually has their own herb garden.
Hmm.
Now, how can you make a nickel out of that?
Yes.
With the capitalism, we'll never deliver anything like that.
Not unless it's turned into a pill.
Yeah, no way. It just
Synthesized. If they could do it.
So then all I say is not to crash capitalism, but just to put it on the table where it works and where it doesn't. I mean, it's great for Rolex watches or something like that.
I would say I differ a bit. I agree with you a bit on the ism issue in terms of. I would put it this way. I would identify a lot of the problem as being capitalism, but I don't have an ism as a solution. I have an ism as a means of, uh, let's say, diagnosing some of the problems in capitalism. But I don't personally have the answers, and I'm not sure an ism exists that does, or possibly can exist. We don't get much perfection, if any, in this life. So I suppose why would we expect one out of something so broad as a political or economic theory? So uh, I don't like believing that, but I'm forced to based on
believing what? That you
life
can't have a
experience.
perfection, you mean?
Uh, Especially in terms of something so complicated as a global economy and markets and that type of thing. Uh, of course, there's always going to be problems, failures, no matter how you organize something that large. It's I'll use an analogy in a war. If you are using carpet bombing, occasionally you're going to hit your own troops. You know, it's just accidents happen, uh, mishaps, other
I
things.
like when you said anything that large, and I just recalls to me like somebody was saying the most radical thing you can do. And I was thinking, okay, what could it be? I want to really be radical. The most radical thing you can do is plant a garden in your yard.
Could be. I would say recovering your individual life and your pursuing uh, to the furthest extent you can what feel to be your own desires rather than trying to fulfill desires you got from somewhere else. That would be the most radical thing we can do in our individual lives, is to live our lives rather than the lives that
The lives of
might
the
help.
collective or something like that, right?
Yeah, or lives that may maximize profit by us seeking happiness through. I'm not an anti-consumerist. I buy my share of things that for enjoyment that I don't necessarily need. Um, but I do think we can fall prey to thinking there's always something out there that will make us happy, when I think it's usually in here, you know, on an individual level. So I agree with you there. That is probably the most radical thing a person could do. Even though it doesn't sound right. It sounds more radical to say I'm going to go blow up a building.
Oh yeah,
But
right.
what does that accomplish though? Not
Nothing.
nothing.
Yeah, actually, it's more the same. But I mean, planting a garden is actually kind of like a stance against all chemicalized food and against overused soil. You're just going to try to cure your own little patch of soil and get it back into health and get it back into life with all the bacterias and little microorganisms that are in soil, and then just reaffirm your dependency on the planet Earth, and not be such an individual that is disconnected from Earth and all its diverse populations. And so
Good
somehow
point.
there's a radicalness to that, and it's actually not a structure that would have a perfection or not a perfection, because it doesn't even need a verbal structure, because we were talking about a great ism or a great financial model of the world government, or how is it going to work for everybody, and how could it be very complex to try to make this. I mean, maybe we could just discuss about just verbalization, because you are a wordsmith in a way, since you're an author, and so verbalization just means to me. We try to look at our life and put it into words so we can share it with others. And
Yeah.
those words are, of course, imperfect vehicles already. Just one word is an imperfect vehicle. And it's
Uh,
just a try. I mean, and tomorrow it probably should be different. We should be flexible enough with our words that every day we get a new take on it. And because we know that they're not really, they're only sounds, actually. I mean, we could actually go that basic, that just by making sound, that's going to translate to be all the panoply of things that can strike my eardrum and be defined by me as a vibration, and somehow that means all that stuff. I mean, how could that all get into those 5, 6, 7 letters? Uh,
yes.
you
Yeah.
know,
It's mysterious as music. Why I've always thought, that one of the, to me, oddest parts of my life is I try not to think about it too much, because I want to leave it as a visceral experience. But if I do think about it, I find the whole idea of music very odd, and how it works, and why does this affect us this way? This thing that can, in a way, be reduced to math, called music, uh, with the scales and chords and physics of sound, etc. And yet it strikes us in such a visceral way, emotionally. I find interesting, but almost in a way disturbing, because it's so beyond at least my understanding
What do you
of
mean disturbing now? Keep at it, because I like it.
uh, the uh, uh, the distance between the scientific understanding of it and the emotional experience of it. Uh, uh, the For me to say start with the physics of sound and how that affects music and why music is structured and how it occurs uh, does in no way explain. It explains to me how the sounds are made, but it in no way explains why do they affect me and most people so intensely, you know.
Well, one thing you could say is music is cultural, right? Because
Yeah,
sometimes other chord systems and other scales, maybe Oriental music doesn't mean a lot to some
true.
people, or maybe primitive music, or just we kind of can always get with drumming somehow, because somehow that there's a vibration there that hits you in the pit of the stomach or somewhere.
Yeah,
But kind of like one string strumming doesn't really send us, but necessarily, or just different periods music. Some people attach to classical or other kind of periods of music, and their complex movement. Really, it's a complex movement that actually moves your body in a way.
I would say, in line with something you said earlier, that my view of uh, I don't like to propose solutions for other people. I mainly try to describe what had seemed helpful to me, and if others find that useful, great. I hope they do. But for me, the best life I can lead is one of not constant physical motion, but always being willing to move. For instance, you mentioned different cultural music. I know that a certain other culture's music might at first not sound that pleasurable to me, but I also know if I give it time that I can begin to feel it, if you will, uh, but that I will have to require some patience of myself. And that's proven true of even American music I like, for instance, jazz. Some of the more avant garde jazz I've learned to really appreciate, but I had to go through a period of learning how to hear it, if you will. Uh, Hear it from as close as I can get to the mind of its creators or the culture of its creators. I can't do it completely, of course, because I'm not them. The music was made in another time, another culture, before I was even born. Um, but I feel it's very helpful to have that patience to allow yourself to uh, adjust your ears in this case and mind, I suppose, of course, to then opening up a new path of music you can enjoy that would have been completely closed to you otherwise.
That's so cool, because that's really what life is all about. In other words, it starts with respect, because you can't even listen to something you don't respect. So then respect, listen, and understand. And that's not only music, but that's all the cultures. That's all the people too.
Yes,
When you can
yes,
respect a person, then you can listen to them, and then you can start to understand or empathize with them, and somehow you can empathize. Must mean you just realize that they're the same root. We talked about that we all have the same mother, right? From
right.
Africa with the DNA. It's like maybe you can actually realize that or know that, and music could be one way, a really great way to to let that start to happen.
Yes, and I agree. I think that applies to every creative form and essentially every aspect of life. I suppose.
Yeah, every aspect, not only other humans, but every being,
Yeah.
every worm or every grass or every,
Yes.
why not?
Instead of a type of music, a type of person. Let me extend it to say the what are called the mentally ill. Uh, often I know a few people that are they successfully are not following standard psychiatric procedure and are doing much better. To other people, they seem odd. To me, I I am able to put myself to the degree possible in their place and see them as being quite accomplished people for having managed to treat some fairly serious conditions uh, without using what has not worked for a lot of people and wasn't working for them at the very least.
Well, most of the time, I think the standard treatments are drugging you out,
Yes,
And so
exactly.
then how can that really work? That can only put you in some kind of a coping state, and then it puts you into a limbo that even if you need more and more of those drugs, but still, if you stay in some kind of a balance with it in a drug state, I mean, that's not really living, is it? I don't even know. I mean, and
I
then
do.
another way to say it is that people cope or don't cope with the stresses and artificiality of our society and the actual stupidity of our society and the things we're doing in total hypocrisy and stuff, just winking our eye or not even. It's all done subconsciously, so we don't even see it. We don't even see the shadow of it, And some people can't cope with that, They don't want to cut that out. Or I'm not trying to make them all honorable. Maybe they are just crazy. I don't know, But I mean, uh, everybody has got some way to swallow life the way it appears, and I think you can also do the same that we were talking about music. Honor, respect, honor how people are managing it, even if they're mismanaging it, and somehow listen and empathize and let them be a part of us because that's the same sickness that's in us somewhere, and somehow it hasn't cropped out in the same way.
I would put it this way: if you live your life only seeking what you already know, you're going to have a very stagnant and, while you may not be aware of it, limited, boring life.
I think you'll become
Because
aware of it for sure. You're going to die in a
let's hope
very
so.
you're going to die in a very bored and a very like inane way, thinking like, what was it all about, and how did I get caught in this mess?
At one point, I wanted to make real quickly is just in terms of you mentioned, well, let's put it in terms of psychiatric drugs, and then you were mentioning the artificiality we deal with. If you think about it, essentially, those drugs are treating artificiality by artificially readjusting us to the artificiality so we're comfortable in it again
Yeah,
when
it's the great
we
numbing
probably shouldn't
process,
be.
right? It's the great
Yeah.
numbing process.
But let me say from experience, I don't have any major diagnoses. I don't want to sound like I do, but I have had, typical things. And I've learned that uh, essentially they uh, they improve you only in terms of readjusting you to what was really probably a rational, if but uncomfortable, recognition of that artificiality. You suddenly became aware of how artificial your environment is. It makes you anxious or depressed, etc. And the drug sort of returns you to that and makes you comfortable in it. Is that a cure or an improvement? Uh, I don't think so anymore. I may have once thought so, but not now.
It's only a cure for the society, and it's not for you. It's actually hanging you on a nail,
Precise.
and saying, okay, this guy will be semi-functional and won't bug us too much, and just let this whole okay, like society is artificial, it's conceptual. It's made out of a whole bunch of agreements and consensus, and
Yeah.
they're always changing. Hopefully, as fast as awareness grows, we could. Wouldn't it be great if we could change society as fast as awareness grows?
Oh,
But we really
no, no,
can't.
we would be
It's
there.
always behind, right?
It's funny you say that because lately I've been thinking and have posted uh, just the line awareness is not enough anymore. Uh, for it is for those who have none, but for those of us like yourself who do, um, we become more and more aware, and yet not necessarily more capable of uh, uh, going beyond the, what is very important, your garden thought, but extending any form of power beyond that is seems to me pretty inaccessible to most of us, no matter how aware we are of various problems. The awareness helps, but we're still somewhat limited in our capacity to get it changing the
We
problem.
don't know. The truth is we absolutely don't know what is the power of making a garden, and we don't know where it translates to and how far it reaches. It doesn't reach as far as the conceptual. It doesn't change concepts necessarily, and so if we're hanging on those concepts, maybe we won't notice anything. And if we're somehow heart-centered, maybe we'll know. Maybe we'll totally notice it.
That's true. I would say yes. I mean, there's a degree of effort involved. Just going out and planting a garden isn't necessarily going to have the effect you mentioned. You have to be very, I would suppose very engaged in it, not just sort of, well, if I plant a garden, I'll feel better. I don't think that's going to work. I think you have to be very much an organic part of that process.
Well, it's a refocus because unless you were refocused, you couldn't do it because you'd say, "Oh, I got a bunch of appointments. I'm making a lot of money. I got to post on my website. I have to get this job. I got to get this job done for somebody." You would never even have any time unless you had to refocus. And you wouldn't do it
Yeah.
in the same context that you're doing all those other things if you happen to be that. I would call it abstract of a person. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
something I want to bring into what we're talking about is a certain capability of humans to abstract things. And maybe it's only humans that can abstract at least the way we do. And we do it
Mm-hmm.
through language and storying. And we do it by focusing on that language as if it was it. That's it. That's life. That
Yes.
language is life. There's a planet back there, but it's just in the shadows. It's not really doing much. It's my language and my agreements and my work ethics and my contracts that are really life, and all that other stuff is just kind of mundane. Somebody grows food and I can buy it, and I go to shopping markets or all that food is. I can go to the Eastern shelves or the Italian shelf, or I can go to the Thai shelf, or like
Right.
these are all abstract things, right? And it's constructed on language, and language is just some place where a lot of people put all their attention on it. And of course, you're an
Yes.
author, so you put a lot of attention on it. And but maybe the creative space is before you get zeroed in on language, on wordsmithing, and
Yes. Yes. I would say that particularly my best work, uh, the basis for it, it does not start in words. It starts in silence, and often just silence preceding a thought. For instance, right after I awake, and my mind is just maybe for a moment, sort of, if you will, paralyzed or
just at
not
rest. Use the
not
word.
not
Use the word at
yes,
rest.
a parked car. Let's put it that way, and or imagery or something nonverbal. Uh, I am probably as much influenced by painters in music as I am writers, um, and that's because of exactly what you're mentioning, the uh, limitations of language. Uh, and while I'm aware I cannot obviously replicate music or art in my writing, I do try to the extent possible, incorporate it. Music's a little easier because of the rhythmic aspect that I can incorporate. I often like to think of my writing rhythm as much like a jazz drummer. Uh, I have a particular one in mind, but sort of syncopated.
Well,
Um,
writers do that. I mean, what comes to mind right immediately to me is James Joyce, and he's a
yes,
musician, right?
yes, yeah, and yes, and I think it's probably maybe all writers do it, and it's a matter of how conscious. For me, it's very conscious part of the process. I I've often said one of the things that would make me happiest would be not only to, of course, see someone on a subway reading my book, but to see them tapping their foot to the beat of the sentences. That would be my ultimate.
Oh
My cat is coming over for attention.
yeah, that's cool.
That's why you see he demands to be petted.
Oh yeah, no, no, go for
Pet,
it.
pet, I think. Uh, but yes, so yeah, as I think as a writer, at least for me, I won't speak for other writers. It's made me all the more aware of the limitations of writing. Uh, Often there's some effect I want to attain that would be much easier to attain if I were a painter, uh, because it's a it's a image that uh, would be, of course, far easier to paint than to translate into words. So, that's just one little aspect.
Well,
But
that's a great challenge. I mean, with that awareness, you're already challenging yourself to do it, and I believe you can do it. If anyone can do it, I think you can. And
yeah, well, I don't want to say
I
it.
mean, at least you can put yourself to it, and then just see, and then it would come out this way, and then the next time it'll come out that way. But somehow, I think words are paint for sure.
Yes, if they can be used that way, especially if you're conscious of their limitations
Well, the
and
only
they're
thing is, this: words are linear, and paint is not linear. Paint is all in front of you at
true,
once. So then
true.
you've got linear. In a way, it's linear, but in another way, you can remember. It's creating a pattern in the memory, so that the painting is in your memory. So it goes on linearly. So then, if you are watching a painter paint, he paints linear also. He paints one brushstroke at a time. But then you go look at it later. So then that's what you're doing. You're painting one brushstroke at a time or one sentence at a time. And then this image that you create is in the memory.
Yeah, yes. And if you think, there was an era where there was poetry, and where most of its intent was to actually be visual as it appeared on the page. But I don't think it worked because the first thing I think is, well, uh, if it loses all qualities of language and is merely trying to duplicate the effect of a painting, then I would rather look at a painting. You see, why? Let's go to the source if we're going to lose all
Okay, right.
purpose.
I was thinking about what you said when we were speaking of music, and I was thinking that sometimes I kind of look at emotion as two basic kinds of emotion, really two distinctions, and one is emotions that kind of squeeze you and kind of roll you closed and stuff, and their fear and anxiety and
Mm.
separation and like protection and all those kinds. And then there's another kind that kind of opens in love and beautiful sunset and I love to be in nature, and somehow there's an opening and a closing, and I guess maybe they have to go together because you can't always breathe in. You got to breathe out too, or vice versa. I don't know. Somehow life cycles and stuff like that. But I mean, we're so used to being pinched and closed and cautious and
Guarded.
yeah, guarded. But I mean, it's also physical and a bodily reaction, and so
Oh,
then
yes,
yeah.
I feel it. I feel that exactly what you're talking about when that's happening. It's not just an emotional feeling. I feel my body, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I mean, it's happening to everybody, but you and I are looking at it. And that's
Yeah.
what we were talking about. Remember when we were saying the television in the doctor's office and all that stuff? And we're noticing that. I'm totally on board with you there. I mean, I feel that. I feel it totally, you know. And
Hmm.
but what I'm saying is like music somehow probably releases that somehow because there's a certain amount of movement there, and then whatever's causing that constriction can just kind of like look up and away from that constricting look, you know, which is depressive or whatever it is. It's something below the radar, you know, below subconscious. And somehow there's this music that goes this way and this way, or however it goes. And somehow that body actually just releases. And I think that's a mechanism of just even for those moments, that subconscious belief structure that says the world is the pits, and I have to close on that. You know, I'm scared of that, and that's the miracle of music and why it translates to every language or without a language.
That's precisely why I called myself a quasi musician. A lot of its purpose is that when I play, for one, it's a nice way of getting away from language. When I play, I tend to uh, I do a lot of recording of music, which is a little different. But when I just play my bass along with records, say, uh, I go into a little bit of uh, sort of a trance, and it's very releasing, and I do feel very moving outward and a release of that, you
So
know.
kinesthetic, that's fabulous. Just to listen to music and play a bass, you know. I think that
Yes,
is a fabulous idea.
I always call it my form of meditation. I have trouble sitting still and doing traditional meditation. So at least for the moment, that's until I perhaps get a little bit, make a little improvement in stillness and being comfortable with that. For now, music is basically my way of meditating. Uh, you know, it centers me without being self focused, so to say. You can see my cat has
Yeah, we like it.
demanded to be part of the video.
No, absolutely. We love her
he
or
wants to
him.
he wants to be named Klaus after the German actor Klaus Kinski.
Oh, right on. There you go. I okay. Now I'm remembering when you said that oftentimes you're not trying to have anyone be like you or tell them what's right or wrong for their life, but you can point to what's worked for you.
Hmm.
And so then, I mean, if I was to point to what worked for me, somehow I had to let go of the whole idea that I could be more silent,
Hmm.
and in that is actually silence. Letting go of it and just following, and there is a knack to kind of not going after another thought, because those thoughts come in a chain, really, that each one sparks off another one, but always built on that same context. And
Yes. Yeah.
so then they don't go very far. They have to start to circle sooner or later, because they're on a similar context. They're on a similar wavelength. And
Yeah. Yeah. I would say if you're, I'm speaking for myself here. If let's say someone recommends to me that meditating would help me a lot, and have read quite a bit about meditation. Um, if I demand of myself that I be still and silent, of course I'm never going to get there. I'm just going to stick in a state of demand, and the basically the complete opposite of the whole point of meditating in the first place. So that's not a good way of going about it. I think what you said is a much better way of going about it. You know.
yeah, I've kind of just let off on all ideas of spiritual growth and awareness growth and all. You know, like this morning, I sat at about 3:30. I didn't feel too sleepy, so I got up and I wrapped some blankets around me and put a pillow on my stomach, and and a blindfold on because our street downstairs is kind of like got a street light out front.
Ah,
And I just sit on the couch for maybe an hour, and then I kind of crash over and fall asleep again. But
yes.
I really don't do it as a practice, and really a whole bunch of thoughts came. Actually, thoughts about my mother's death came, and about sharing it sometime on the show. I'm not gonna do it now, but I mean, these kind of ideas just flowed. So there was really no peace. There was really no stillness or any kind of thing that would traditionally be called meditation. But sometimes I just sit there because it just happens. It's not like I'm not even doing it. So meditation, it just happens when it happens, and it doesn't happen when it doesn't, and that's kind of how I let it happen. That's all there is to it. With me, it's not really a practice that I'm doing or trying to improve upon.
Yeah, and I would say that, in our society in particular, with all the, well, you live in Chicago, where I live, it's much, I wouldn't call it a small town, but, it's closer to a small town than a metropolis. There's a busyness, just in your environment, even if you're not participating in it, that makes, traditional meditation or those types of things pretty difficult. I mean, it's hard to uh, and probably not healthy to demand, say, stillness when uh, we're surrounded by so much busyness or the agitating sounds, for instance, the TVs we mentioned, or even just, I notice if I turn my computer off, how much noise I'm not aware of. And it's very agitating when I notice it by turning it off and turn it back on. But normally I'm oblivious to it. But it has to be having some effect on me, and probably one that's not very inducive to, in other words, I'm almost more comfortable with that artificial noise and humming and etc. than stillness and silence. And it may not be, uh, uh, there may be better routes to accomplish the same thing. For instance, like you said, planting a garden may accomplish the same effect without pursuing stillness.
See, there's a lot of things you just said there that are huge. Like for instance, turning off noise makes you feel uncomfortable. I'm not pointing to you, but us makes us feel uncomfortable because then we hear the interior noise in a way. But the
Mm-hmm.
stillness
Mm-hmm.
that I'm talking about, the moment you said that in a busy city that stillness is not available, I just snapped into stillness like you couldn't believe it. Like that stillness that's always there poked its head up and said, "Sure, I'm here.
Hmm.
I'm always
Interesting.
here." And that's what I want you to know. It said to me, I want you to, that's like your stability. That's the platform you're on. And all the rest is just, movements that you can play with and you don't have to play with. And that's the kind of stillness that really is important. I mean,
he's he's very much acting like Klaus Kinski right
yeah,
now.
right. No, he's a good head. I didn't have him on camera there, but he did a good jump.
Sorry
And
to interrupt, but
no, that
yes, yes. I mean, uh, I'm not necessarily more comfortable with the that hum, the electronic hums, for instance. I would just say that in a bizarre way, that's almost my my nature in a bizarre way. It's of course artificial, but it's much closer to me than say the grass and trees outside. It's that these hums and the other artificial things you see around me. I'm in my office most of the day, and so here's my environment for a lot of the day.
what happened to me was really something pretty interesting. I got into a condo, and so then I was on the fifth floor. I was pretty far away from any kind of nature. Besides, all we had out there was a parking lot and a tree, you know. And
Hmm.
on that fifth floor, I happened to have a couple of balconies, and for some reason, I'd started to plant pots, you know. And I got so close to nature because it was just in my room. I just opened the two balcony doors, and I was there. It was always accessible to me. Just walk out and just say, "Oh, there's a bug," you know. "Oh, look at a new leaf shot out." Oh, you know, I was just so close that I mean, if I had a yard and a garden and a farm, I wouldn't have been that close. And
Hmm.
that was kind of like a amazing experience.
It is odd that that oftentimes something is very available to us and right in front of us, and we don't notice it for quite a while, and then when we do, it can be quite an amazing uh, experience to realize that this has been a nice little exit from or way out of. Uh, Let me put it this way: my door out of the apartment's right there, and I can go get fresh air in 5 seconds. But often enough, I, believe it or not, in a way, forget that, and will stay working here and not realize that I could really use a breath of fresh air and get outside and look at see some get basically engulfed by natural light. So sometimes I actually have to make myself do that. As ridiculous as that is, it becomes quote normal for me to sit here for hours on end. And even though at some level I know, hey, you need to get out of that chair and you know take a breather. Even if no matter how important what I'm working on is to me. So I think that awareness again, uh, perhaps a different kind, but uh, not forgetting simple things. So simple as walking out a door that's 3 feet away, for even for 10 minutes.
Very well said.
And getting back to language, it's interesting that you brought that up because it doesn't come out till June 2011. So I don't want to make this. It's a little early, really, to be plugging my book, but
Well, let's
anyway,
talk about it. Let's see, because
okay.
I think it's got a kind of a really interesting premise.
Well, it's
Another point of view, right? That's important
I
in the story, the point of view or the narrator.
I raised it because it seemed relevant now to sort of the sum total of the things we've discussed. Basically, it's a 9/11 novel with a very odd twist that occurred to me one day, um, which was, what if I write a 9/11 novel um, from the perspective of one of the towers? And I had a reason at the time that I don't recall that I chose the South Tower. Uh, and I spent a few days with that idea, uh, feeling as though, well, this is a subject probably best left to to well-known authors. And then I just decided, no, that's a limitation I'm placing on myself. And the idea was really resonating in me for this reason. I was thinking, if I make the tower itself the narrator, you now have, of course, its thousands of windows, its height, its computer infrastructure, which I sort of use in a very short explanation of how it's able to be conscious. It's not a science fiction novel, you sort of
But anyway, it's like a metaphor for a nervous system.
Yes, very much so. And uh, the point of that was to produce a novel that would provide not only a new but multi-dimensional perspective, as well as the one that's has not been seen 10,000 times on video, captures, which is from the inside out. All we have is witness accounts of that. So this book attempts to give that as well. What experiencing as a reader the event, which is, of course, sort of at the center of the book, but not the whole book, from the inside out, which would, of course, be otherwise impossible. Lastly, we talked about painting before, and someone else had once described my other novels as seeming to have a kind of cubist aspect to them. And that rang true to me. And so when I came up with this idea, I decided, well, let's do this consciously because it's part of the whole idea. And so a lot of my research was really into cubist art, painting, poetry, and theory. And probably the most easiest image for people to access is Picasso paintings, for example. Not all of which would be called cubist, but that's good enough for our purposes. Where they're basically a view of an object simultaneously from multiple perspectives. And so it was enjoyable to write because it was such a challenge. How am I going to do this? And the most interesting part of the research process was by pure unbelievable coincidence, a friend of mine in Michigan, when I lived there, lived down the street, and his mother was friends with an architect who had worked with the main architect of the towers on the towers, and I was able to interview him. And the oddest and most useful thing for me as a writer that came out of that interview was I asked him, if you were to choose two actors who would best, in your mind, capture your view of the tower's character, if you will, who would you name? One of them he named was Gary Cooper. And I later found out that Cary Grant's stage name is a sort of anagram based on Gary Cooper. And because I think Cary Grant has such a great voice and his accent is technically known as Mid-Atlantic, it all kind of made sense. So the South Tower became Cary Grant and the North Tower is sort of Gary Cooper. So it's throughout the book, the quote author of the South Tower has the voice of Cary Grant. And my little short film I put together, I actually hired a Cary Grant impersonator to narrate the first chapter. And so far, people are pretty happy with it. Probably partially because I'm not much of a voice talent. I really don't like to perform my own work. But also, it was a nice touch having he pulled it off pretty well. And then as well, my other idea was that the building addresses people as though they're reading what are sometimes called airplane novels, which of course would be novels people typically read on airplanes. And those are usually, the kind of novels we spoke of before, entertaining, novels that'll pass the time aboard a plane. So the book is called Airplane Novel, partially because of the subject, of course, but also to play off the concept of airplane novels. And the South Tower basically speaks to the reader as though the reader is on an airplane. And I'll leave it there. Um, so that's basically the main ideas that I think make this a very unique 9/11 novel. And to me, the first one that really takes a zoom out and wide perspective view rather than focusing on one or two characters or a family. I wanted to do a broad macro view novel as opposed to focusing on one or two characters, as I believe almost all of the novels have done. So I don't feel that I'm being egotistical in saying I at least feel I accomplished my mission by my terms, and I'm very happy with it. As far as the public reception goes, I've learned, one never knows. It's certainly no Stephen King
Oh
novel.
yeah. Well, I mean,
It's
it's coming to me. Of course, I haven't read it, and I don't know anything with exactly what it's going to be like. But what's coming to me is our earlier conversation of a painting, and when you write, you write some kind of I don't even want to call it a story because every story through a character or through a family is linear, and we were just talking about nonlinear or like the whole view or a painting. Or you're writing that the narrator is actually a tall building with thousands of windows. We could associate with windows with eyes or views or somehow
that was my
the
idea.
whole
Yes.
painting is. And then saying that most of your research was actually just on Cubist painters and how to do all these overlays and somehow build this structure that's built out of words, but actually is a music and a painting and a complete image in itself. I mean, it sounds like totally exciting breakthrough for. If I hope it works the way I'm imagining, but even if it works in a very little way, it's like a whole new genre. It's a whole new way to weave words and I don't know. It sounds like a beautiful creative inspiration. I hope you're a genius. I hope it
Well, I
pays you
don't know.
back.
I don't know about that, but I would say I highly doubt that I will ever surpass this book in terms of uh, I there's guts and blood in this book. There's flesh, everything went into it, and uh, I will remain happy with it regardless. But at the same time, of course, I do hope that people find, very much hope that people find it to be as um, there are story elements involved. The tower follows certain characters, some true, some invented, um, and follows their storylines. So there are storylines, but at the same time, I think the real excitement is in the uh, challenging the now almost embedded images of 9/11 and the World Trade Center we have, and allowing people to see it from not just one, but a whole set of new perspectives. And I guess my greatest hope, it's never money for me with writing. It's my hope that people find, especially this book, as exciting to read as I did it, as I found it to write. That would be my
Oh yeah,
that's my
it
hope.
sounds very
You know,
exciting.
So
Have you ever been, by the way, in the trade towers? Or I never was, but I mean,
I have been in front of them briefly. Unfortunately, I did not. I wish I had, of course, selfishly for purpose of writing the novel, but also just historically, I wish I had been. I have visited the site, but of course, you know, there's not much to see, at least at the time I went, except the void, essentially, which was still very useful as a writer. I'm glad I went to that. But I do wish I'd had the experience of, say, riding the elevators up, or fortunately, there's a lot of material, of course, that is on a lot of archives if you do some searching, where you might find a video someone took of riding the elevator up. So I at least was able to access that type of thing and interview some people that, had various experiences there or related to the tower. So, I did the best I could, but I certainly wish I had taken that chance when I was standing there to actually go into it. But what can you
I some that it kind of like strikes me. I wonder exactly how far I should go into this subject because maybe it's sensitive. Of course, we see it as a tragedy, and we see it as just so outlandish. Such an outlandish tragedy. And of course, that is also kind of like a construction that very self-centered construction. Yeah, anything that's arbitrary like that, it's not an earthquake that brought them down, it's something else. And it's a kind of an amazing choreography that brought them down when it would be so much easier. It would seem like it would be so much easier to bring a nuclear device into the U.S. somewhere and detonate it. And
Yes.
that would be such a simple task, but for some reason, the grace of God has not done that. And the fact that the trade towers were, and not quite 10 years ago, and nothing like that has really reoccurred, which might have totally shocked the world because it would have shocked our stock market and shocked our whole currency and shocked everything, and to just assume that we're so good when our airport security is so great, and somehow we're really doing it, that we're protecting the nation, and look at that, nobody's ever tread on us, don't tread on me, and all that, and personalizing all that miracle, the fact that these things aren't happening again, and in one way, and then in another way, in just keeping it as our personal tragedy. That's so important that in the meantime we've ignited atomic bombs and done carpet bombing and killed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of innocents. And
Yes.
without a bat
Yes.
of the eye, without actually just saying, well, I mean, it was the fault of the enemy. They were hiding behind grandmothers, and a couple of grandmothers went down. Sure, yeah. I mean, maybe a million, but I mean, what do we care, right?
Well, I
And,
always make
and
the
we just
point.
celebrate our 60,000 lost in Vietnam, like that's like the huge tragedy of it's very personalized, our loss, and it just seems like something about it isn't quite right.
I think it's understandable, but at the same time, I always phrase it in terms of just consider the fact that uh, you, at least in the mainstream press, almost or perhaps never hear any count of dead civilians as a result of the latest Iraq war, for instance. It's just not even reported. It's
Not
just
to
not.
us, not to us. Everyone else in the
Yes,
world knows about it.
to us, it's portrayed as though it doesn't exist. It hasn't happened. The way I dealt with that in the novel, I did not, even though I think it's probably clear I'm fairly, have some political views, but I didn't want that to be part of the novel. So I basically had the building not making a distinction. Uh, uh, it viewed humans in their entirety rather than not as a means of justifying the terrorists or terrorism, uh, or to make any other point other than uh, that as horrible as it was just another example of the horrible things humans will do. And from a building's perspective, the specific of the event or the supposed purpose, or whether one side sees it as a good,
Yeah, cool.
is a
I get it. It's like you didn't give a passport to the building, and then it's not a representative of the U.S. It's more like a mountain, like a representative of God.
precisely like a mountain. That's it. And so neutral in a sense.
Yeah, just
Not
commenting on the folly of humanity, right?
Yes, yes, and not neutral in the sense that it's emotionless. The building develops emotions, and that's a whole. I'll leave that for people to discover instead of trying to explain it. But I just want to make clear it's not. It's not. It may sound as though, well, in case I froze, it may sound as though, well, this is a sterile looking building as narrator. It can only be a sterile sounding novel. Not. It's the exact opposite. Just
Definitely, we got to get together again when the novel's out, and then
yeah.
we got to see. I got to see this thing, and then we're gonna really go for it because this thing is like I think it's a new genre. I don't know. It's just.
I hope so. I hope it at least. I've always said my goal is readership, and not for ego, but because, especially this book, I have some things I want people to see. And just like a painter, I want people to look at my painting, and less so now, but before the tragedy, been seen as somewhat sterile. That is not the nature of the book at all. It's quite the opposite. It's a very intense read. It certainly is not of any traditional genre. It's probably, but I would say incorporates elements of almost every genre, except potentially westerns, and even that may be incorporated at parts because the book takes some background, some history. It does not merely stick to the period immediately preceding and after the event. At the same time, it's not a quote historical novel. These are brief moments in the book, but I hope they do bring and keep that in the picture without losing its. I think it maintains continuity, but also allows for the emergence of history into the story as well as just the immediacy of the 9/11 event as we know it, at least.
Oh, Paul, I truly thank you. I think we covered so many topics, and we really,
I,
kindled a friendship.
I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I feel we agree on it. And let me say, if people would like to actually have a visual view of some of my ideas in the book, as well as hear the first chapter narrated by someone I hired who read it in Cary Grant voice, just go to www.airplanenovel.com and you can watch a short film that has the entire first chapter in it, plus some nice visuals. And the South Tower is played by Cary Grant reading the first chapter.
All right. I'll put that link there for sure. I'll put that link in the film, and also I'll put it live link underneath when we put it up.
And I just think people will enjoy it. It's not so much to plug the book; it's just to
Yeah.
give people a taste of, hopefully get them a little excited about it and enjoy. I think just maybe the film itself. So,
Thank
but
you
it's
very
it's been.
much, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, everybody. Paul A. Toth will have these links, and you can check his YouTube video. And hopefully, it'll be summer quick enough so that we don't have snow, and we do have Paul's book. So, thanks everyone for coming, and keep it coming. And I have a real strong urge to talk to everybody or anybody that wants to, and just say, well, what's right about life, and let's let it happen. Let's let things, life supportive behavior in ourselves, and give people hints that it's okay. It's a good time to do life supportive things, and why not? So, thanks everybody, and bye from me and from Paul.